Imagine your body as a massive, bustling city. In this city, your kidneys are the high-demand, state-of-the-art water treatment plants. They're constantly working behind the scenes, right? Filtering out toxins, balancing your electrolytes, and managing fluid levels for the entire metropolis. But what exactly happens when this critical emergency infrastructure just suddenly crashes? Well, that is acute kidney injury, or AKI. It's an abrupt deterioration. We're talking over a matter of days or even literally hours that leads to a super dangerous buildup of waste in your blood. In this explainer, let's dive right in and find out exactly how this happens. Just to put the sheer scale of this into perspective, healthy kidneys make up only about 0.5% of our total body mass. Tiny, right? Yet, because their filtration job is absolutely crucial, they demand a staggering 20% of our total resting cardiac output. They're incredibly greedy for blood, accounting for a full 10% of the body's total oxygen consumption. And honestly, this immense vascular demand is exactly why they are so incredibly vulnerable when things go wrong in the rest of the system. To classify acute kidney injury, we're going to look at 4 key areas today. Number 1, the pre-renal supply problem. Number 2, intrinsic machinery failure. Number 3, post-renal blocked exits. And finally, number 4, diagnosing the actual source. Okay, so here's our home base for understanding AKI. We can essentially categorize it into 3 broad anatomical zones. First up is pre-renal. These are issues occurring before the kidney. Second, we have intrinsic, which is damage inside the kidney parenchyma itself. And third is post-renal, obstructions happening after the kidney, down in the urinary tract. Let's go ahead and break these down one by one, starting at the very beginning of the flow. Section 1, pre-renal. The supply problem. The absolutely crucial point to remember here is that in pre-renal AKI, the kidney tissue itself is initially entirely normal and undamaged. The issue is purely hemodynamic. So the sequence goes a little something like this. First, there's a decrease in the effective circulating volume of blood. Because of this drop, the kidneys are inadequately perfused, meaning they simply aren't getting that massive 20% of cardiac output they're expecting. As a direct physical result of that, the glomerular filtration rate, or GFR, just drops markedly. The body panics, tries to hold on to whatever fluid it possibly can, and this results in oliguria, which is a severely low urine output. Now, let's look at some real-world culprits. Hypovolemia is a major one. Think absolute fluid loss from things like a hemorrhage or severe dehydration. Or, the tank might be completely full, but the pump itself is broken, kind of like what we see in congestive heart failure. But most importantly for everyday practice, you really have to watch out for impaired renal autoregulation. Really common drugs like NSAIDs, ACE inhibitors, and ARBs can totally interfere with the kidney's ability to dilate and constrict its own vessels. And because the kidney isn't structurally damaged here, if you restore that blood flow quickly, the kidney function actually recovers super fast. But what happens if that supply is cut off for way too long, or a nasty toxin enters the system? Well, that brings us to section 2, intrinsic. The machinery fails. Let's step right onto the factory floor now. If we zoom all the way into the nephron, we can pinpoint exactly where intrinsic damage actually occurs. It could be in the small vessels, the glomerulus itself, the tubulointerstitium, or the tubules. By figuring out the exact histological site of the injury, we can basically play detective and track down the precise disease process causing the renal failure.
And that brings us to the absolute most common intrinsic culprit of all, acute tubular necrosis, or ATN for short. This is exactly what it sounds like, guys. The actual epithelial cells lining the renal tubules are injured and just die off. It's essentially a total breakdown of the kidney's internal conveyor belts. Most often this is the tragic end result of severe, prolonged pre-renal ischemia, but it can definitely also be directly caused by specific toxins.
You really have to notice the cascading disaster of ischemic ATN here. When oxygen delivery plummets, it isn't just a simple, quiet shutdown. Down at the tubular level, the lack of ATP leads to a breakdown of the cytoskeleton and a total loss of cell polarity. These tubular cells actually undergo apoptosis and necrosis, sloughing off right into the tubule lumen. This necrotic debris basically forms physical casts that completely clog and obstruct the tubule. Fluid then backleaks across that bare, damaged epithelium, crashing the GFR even further. It's just a vicious compounding cycle of injury. But ischemia isn't the only way to destroy these tubules. We also have toxic ATN, which generally comes in 2 flavors, exogenous and endogenous. Exogenous toxins come from the outside. We're talking heavy-duty antibiotics like aminoglycosides, chemotherapy drugs like cisplatin, or even iodinated contrast media. Endogenous toxins, on the other hand, come from right inside the body. A classic example is myoglobin released from crushed muscle tissue in rhabdomyolysis, or massive hemoglobin release during hemolysis. Oh, and we absolutely can't forget tumor lysis syndrome, where rapidly dying cancer cells release huge amounts of uric acid that literally crystallize inside and destroy the tubules. Wild, right? Now, while ATN affects the tubules, other intrinsic sites can definitely fail too. If the glomerular filters fail, you'll see conditions like lupus nephritis or Goodpasture syndrome. If the interstitium, which is the supportive tissue around the nephrons, becomes inflamed, it's often an acute allergic reaction to medications like NSAIDs or antibiotics. We call that interstitial nephritis. And if the internal wiring, like the small blood vessels, fail, it's usually due to crazy vascular emergencies like thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura or malignant hypertension. Let's move on to section 3, post-renal, the blocked exit. If we track the entire urinary tract from the renal pelvis down through the ureters into the bladder and all the way out the urethra, we can easily see how a blockage anywhere along this specific path causes post-renal AKI. But it is super vital to note that because our kidneys have such an immense reserve capacity, an obstruction usually has to affect both kidneys or happen in a patient who only has one functioning kidney to cause a massive spike in their serum creatinine.
The mechanics here are honestly pure plumbing. You get a partial or total obstruction of unidirectional urine flow. Because the fluid literally has nowhere to go, it backs up, causing increased retrograde hydrostatic pressure. This physical back pressure travels all the way up into the nephron, completely interfering with the normal pressure gradients needed for glomerular filtration. The pressure gets so intensely high that it literally pushes back against the incoming blood, causing the GFR to just plummet.
So, when you're looking for the roadblock, bladder neck obstruction from an enlarged prostate is a massively common one. But as a sort of medical detective, you also have to hunt for bilateral kidney stones, retroperitoneal fibrosis, clamping down on the ureters, tumors encroaching on the anatomy, or sometimes something as simple, and entirely fixable by the way, as an obstructed Foley catheter in a hospitalized patient.
Which leads us to Section 4, Diagnosing the Source.
So we have three radically different ways the kidneys can fail. How on earth do we actually tell them apart? Well, the absolute gold standard is comparing the fractional excretion of sodium, or FNA, alongside the BUN to creatinine ratio. In prerenal azotemia, the kidney is basically undamaged but completely starving for blood. It thinks the body is super dehydrated, so it furiously reabsorbs salt and water. Therefore, FNA is incredibly low, less than 1%, and the BUN to creatinine ratio shoots up above 20 because the slow flow allows for maximum urea reabsorption. In stark contrast, in intrinsic ATN, those tubular cells are dead. They literally cannot reabsorb sodium, so the FNA is high, greater than 1%, and that BUN to creatinine ratio drops because the specialized reabsorption machinery is totally broken. Plus, we can literally look at the evidence left behind at the scene of the crime. By examining urinary sediment under a microscope, we get direct visual clues. If you see normal sediment or just highline casts, you want to think pre-renal or post-renal. But if you see those classic muddy brown granular casts and renal tubular epithelial cells, that points directly to acute tubular necrosis. On the flip side, if you see red blood cell casts, it means the glomerulus is bleeding, pointing to glomerulonephritis. The urine literally tells the story of the damaged anatomy. We've seen how fixing the volume, clearing out the toxins, or unblocking the exit can very often reverse acute kidney injury. The kidney has this remarkable capacity to heal, but it isn't perfect. When severe AKI strikes, especially on top of older, already tired kidneys, the repair process can actually become maladaptive. Scar tissue forms. So the big question we must leave you with is this: is an acute kidney injury really just a temporary crisis, or is it actually the first domino falling on the path to chronic kidney disease? We'll see you in the next explainer to find out.